We're here in Haarlem at the 5th Interdisciplinary Conference on Psychedelic Research, our 5th major conference on psychedelic science and therapy. Who of you has never been to ICPR before? Wow. And for who of you is this their first conference on psychedelics? Wow, okay, well that's very indicative of the moment that we're in, I think.
This is actually the 10th anniversary of ICPR. The first one I came in 2012 as a master's student, and this year I'm going to speak myself for the first time.
What's most exciting is how large this community has grown and how many people are now interested in participating in psychedelic research.
Today we have research into psychedelics across universities in the whole of the Netherlands. We find ourselves in a world with numerous venture capital firms specialized in psychedelics. We have biotech startups, newsletters, websites, podcasts, YouTube channels offering investment advice. There are microdosing bros, patent trackers, patent lawyers, organizations tracking the process of clinical research, testing proprietary chemicals, retreat centers, therapists, training programs, Netflix films, documentary series on psychedelics, stock monitors, journalists with a specialized psychedelics beat, psychedelics at the World Economic Forum. This is the world we're in now.
Can you highlight some of the big changes in this field?
Yeah, it's unrecognizable almost. Since 2016, Michael Pollan's book came out, which has recently been made into a Netflix documentary. There's a lot more interest in psychedelics. Like people who had never heard of it before, they see this documentary, they read his book, and they become interested and curious what this is all about. And at the same time, interest from businesses has sparked enormously as well. The total market on psychedelics is about 4 billion now, which is super tiny compared to big pharma, but for where this field is coming from, with very small studies funded by philanthropists, small organizations, it's a sea change. I think, and that's important to remember, that what makes these substances unique is the experiences that they invoke, and that these are deep down human experiences.
These are compounds that produce changes in thought, mood, and perception that normally would only occur when you're dreaming or when you're having a religious experience. So think about it. A minuscule, tiny amount of this compound can go into your brain, stay there for a couple of hours, leave the brain again, and for many people, they never see the world in the same way again, for better, for worse. I said, how is it possible that a molecule can do that? What part of the brain does that molecule hit that can cause something so powerful to happen? They force you to ask the question, what does it mean to be a human? What is consciousness?
Can you explain us what are psychedelics and how do they change the way how our brain works?
Yeah, so once psychedelics enter the brain, they first stimulate the so-called serotonin 2A receptor. That's an excitatory receptor. That means that it is increasing the likelihood that our neuron becomes active. First of all, the thalamus, so the structure in our brain which is filtering information, is more open, so the filtering function is reduced, sending more information to the cortex. And then in the cortex we see that our sensory brain regions, so the brain regions which are responsible for seeing and hearing, etc., those are very much in sync, probably leading to this heightened sensory experience. At the same time, the brain areas which are responsible for integrating this information, for making sense of this information, bringing it together, they are loosely connected to the rest of the brain, probably leading to a new way of integrating information, and therefore maybe also the feeling of being able to challenge old perceptions, finding a new way of looking at yourself, of looking at the world. And that might actually then be very helpful for patients to be able to step out of rigid thinking patterns or ruminous thinking, which, for example, depressed patients suffer from, and just finding a new outlook on the world.
I have relatives that have also been have suffered from not very good treatments. So I think for a long time I've just been thinking, can this really be true? And what's actually going on? Why can we not figure this out and stuff? And I think that this is just one of the things where it seems like maybe something can actually happen in psychiatry finally for once in a while.
Why do psychedelics have so much potential in treating different kinds of mental health disorders?
Psychedelics seem to have the ability to do something that other treatments don't do. They change the way people think about their disorder. They can break people out of routines of thinking that are destructive and persistent. And that's why they have such a broad utility. You can use them for depression, use them for anxiety, use them for addiction. We're doing trials now in anorexia and OCD, or disorders in which people get locked into thinking processes, thinking loops that they don't want to be in, but they can't escape from. For most people, the real benefit of a psychedelic drug is going to be when you use it to change people's minds, but also let them engage then with psychotherapy to maintain and persist this improvement.
I was running 2 LSD studies in the last 15 years, and in the last 80 years we have in Switzerland also the opportunity to get individual permission for individual treatment with LSD, MDMA and psilocybin.
How do psychedelics such as psilocybin compare to other traditional psychiatric drugs?
On the psychological level, what I see as a therapist is that people get into a profound contact with themselves, with the whole personality, in the sense of they see the good and the bad. Albert Hofmann say heaven and hell, also in the outer world, in the inner world. It is a kind of holistic approach to learn about the whole, not only about the symptoms. And that is what patients say. They say, I felt connected to the whole world, to the universe, to God, but also to myself, to my wounds, to my past, to my parents, to my relatives. And in that sense, it is a deep experience of human beingness and also symptomatology. That's why we use it in therapy as well as in personal growth experiences.
Some people say that the most difficult experiences during the psychedelic experience are the most useful. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, definitely. There's something about getting in touch with, I guess, the parts of us that we don't normally want to get in contact, those sort of, disowned parts of ourselves, our shadow, also, old traumas, old memories. And actually, I think it's really brave, people who manage to do that work, to get in contact, and really, we witness such powerful healing when people are able to do that.
Participants who go through the trials and they go through these psychedelic assisted therapy treatments, they do experience some incredibly difficult things. So although they've been absolutely gut-wrenching and really incredibly difficult, they find them incredibly meaningful and really important to them. And I think that speaks to something in us, in our desire to heal and recover, and a kind of acknowledgement that actually that path and that journey is quite hard. It is difficult, it is fraught with challenge, but somehow it's really meaningful to be able to move through that.
Is it the substance that has this healing potential, or it's only the substance embedded in this therapeutic context and as assisting psychotherapy?
There is a great interest now, if it would be possible, to have the potential and the healing potential of these substances without psychedelic experiences. Like you take the pill, you sleep overnight, and you wake up perfectly healthy and happy for the rest of your life. That's the dream behind that. And I am not so optimistic with that, and maybe I hope a little bit that it will not turn out to be like that. It is more a catalyst and a helper for a personal psychological process, a growing process or a healing process that needs time, that needs also guidance and reflection by other people. But because we as humans, we are social beings, we need the feedback of others, we need the help of others.
I do palliative care at the Jewish General Hospital, and I'm doing psilocybin-assisted therapy for end-of-life distress. I'm also part of the MAPS research team and hope to do that work once MDMA is available.
What's the potential of psychedelics in treating end-of-life distress?
I think it has a very strong chance of becoming the standard of care. So far, our limited experience having treated the first patients legally in Quebec has been very positive. By psychedelic medicine and creating a mystical experience, we're able to give them a sense of unity with being and a sense of continuity and timelessness. Specifically related to end-of-life distress, psilocybin is the most widely studied at this stage. LSD is generally very similar to psilocybin, it just has a longer duration of effect. And there are limited studies on ketamine and MDMA that are somewhat positive. They're just not as definitive and the study quality hasn't been as good. But that's about to change and hopefully we have a bunch underway.
How do you see the future potential of the therapeutic use of ketamine?
We treat hardcore, severe, treatment-resistant depression. And we found that some of them were impressively improving. Ketamine is not a one-time treatment as other psychedelics, one or a few, but we do it repeatedly, twice per week for 6 weeks, and then if the response is good, we also continue, we build up the dose. Also, ketamine is not just any pharmacological agent. It needs to be applied with utmost care in a setting that is akin to what we do in the classic psychedelic treatments. We have about 200 patients in a national program now who are coping quite well, and they use ketamine at home once a week, once per 2 weeks, and we taper it down. We are in contact with all of them, and we sort of working towards a model where they have confidence that there is this compound that will help them if depression starts to increase again.
Look at what's happening to psilocybin. So apart from the little mushrooms that grow naturally in fields and forests all across the world, we now also have psilocybin mushroom infused coffee, Hollandia truffles grown in bulk, in bioreactor vats. That's the thing. Competing business interests registering intramuscular psilocybin, transdermal patches, nasal sprays, injectable psilocybin for major depression, for treatment-resistant depression, for postnatal depression, for bipolar depression, psilocybin for PTSD, for alcohol use disorder, for cocaine use disorder, for tobacco use, for headaches, for Alzheimer's, for OCD, for PTSD, you name it.
Not only do I think psilocybin makes nicer people, but I believe psilocybin makes smarter, more intelligent people, especially as they age. My contribution, I think, is showing that microdosing with psilocybin works when you can catalyze it with something like niacin and lion's mane that amplifies the potential benefit, where psilocybin by itself at low concentrations may not.
So can you talk about your research?
Yeah, so we developed what is called a self-blinding protocol, which is how microdosers can implement their own placebo control without clinical intervention. This is a citizen science initiative where you are administering your own placebo control in a way that has some really cool advantages because it allows you to run a large-scale study with placebo control, but without the financial and administrative burdens of a traditional clinical trial. So on one hand, we have found that microdosers improved on a large variety of psychological measures. However, what we have also found is that people who are in the placebo control group improved equally. So what does this suggest is that yes, microdosers do improve, but taking placebos is sufficient to reproduce the same benefits.
How do you see the future of microdosing?
So I think one of the major limitations, not just of our particular trial, but the microdosing literature in general, is that it's on healthy people at this point. So microdosing has not been tested yet on a patient population, and the effects may be different in that context. It might be that microdosing can be helpful to treat specific conditions. Right now, we just cannot say anything about that because all of the studies are based on healthy populations.
Can you explain us what neuroplasticity is and how is it associated with the use of psychedelics?
What we have seen in animal studies is that after the administration of a psychedelic, we see that there are new synapses in the brain, so new parts that connect different neurons. So there is something happening in the brain is changing, and it has the capacity to learn new things or maybe forget old things. However, at this point, this has only been shown in animals, so we have no idea whether this is actually also present in humans. If it were, and if we can show that this happens, that means that there might be a window of opportunity where patients can, in a way, reorganize their brain.
It's really cool with this field that is also so small still, that you have philosophy, you have psychology, you have neuroscience, you have different aspects of all things combined in one. And you also have patient groups that are telling their stories, so I think you get a really good idea.
Your consciousness is not in your head. Your head is not a receptacle or a kind of cup where you put your consciousness in. Your consciousness is not in your head. It's the other way around. Your head is in your consciousness, and my consciousness and his consciousness, because we can see you. The head, the body, is what our mental inner life looks like when represented on the screen of perception.
I'm interested in how we can find other ways to bring psychedelic treatments to people outside of this clinical trial paradigm, because it makes them so incredibly expensive, it takes forever, and it might never succeed. So it seems to me the wrong way at a time when so many people are already experimenting with psychedelics. Instead of giving them really good information, we just do this massive research project, in my view, in the wrong direction.
For me, it's very new because I'm coming from other pharma drug developments, and what I see here in the psychedelics is that people is very open to talk about all of different aspects. So not only the pharmacological of the clinical aspect, but also the ethical, the legal around. I hear criticisms about what we are doing wrong. What can we do differently?
Some of the psychedelic drugs have been used for thousands of years by indigenous people in a specific cultural and traditional context. Do you think we can take these substances out from this context and use them in modern medicine?
Well, first of all, I'm a bit skeptical of claims that the use of psychedelics goes back to millennia, because if you closely look at the historical record and anthropological evidence, it is not that convincing that the use of mind-altering substances indeed goes back and was widespread across different cultures for millennia. If only it's indicating that a few populations had access to something that might have mind-altering substances, but even there the evidence is mostly anecdotal, and most of the traditions that allegedly go back thousands of years actually go back hundreds of years, such as, for instance, ayahuasca use. It's a relatively recent invention in the Amazon. But I still think there's a lot of value to be gained from the wisdom and the knowledge gained within those indigenous uses of psychedelics that could also be of use in a Western context. And indeed, we should, instead of like developing a new paradigm, a new medical paradigm, I think we should aim for more crosstalk between those different uses, like the medical discourse that we're currently employing in psychedelic medicine, and the more ritual, religious discourse that most people associate with the indigenous use of psychedelics.
Do you think psychedelics have a place outside of the medical realm? Is there a place for recreational use of psychedelics?
There are many different reasons why people take psychedelics. Sometimes it's for initiation rites, it's for religious purposes, there's personal growth, there's exploration, there's recreational use, and I think they're all equally legitimate. So I think there should always be a plural approach to psychedelics, and medicalizing psychedelics shouldn't necessarily mean that all of the other reasons for people using psychedelics should be put aside.
When psychedelics became illegal, there was more scrutiny that was placed on Black and brown people, and the whole idea of drug users and drug abusers was used to criminalize people of color, to fill the prisons with black people. There's much more danger around drug use for black people, and so psychedelics, also like so many substances, being as criminalized as it is, so many of us just feel like we want to distance ourselves and move away from that as far as possible so that we're not targeted, so that we're not incarcerated, or even that we don't even want people to associate us with all of those bad things that people connect to drug use. There are actually many people of color who are involved, but they keep a very low profile, so they may not come out to conferences like this because it may feel too risky.
You do not know, and most people listening do not know, the state of heightened paranoia and concern and anxiety that the government any minute could break down your doors and arrest you. And to me, the use of psilocybin and psychedelics is a civil right, fundamentally. You have a freedom of right to your own consciousness. If you can improve it, then you have the right to make that choice. No government should take that choice away from you.
Criminalizing them is actually insane, and it's just not true that these are among the most dangerous compounds in the world, with no medical applications. You know, that has been proved to be untrue. We must change our drug policies globally to accept what we now know scientifically to be so. And it's slowly happening, but it's very slow in the progress.
As an organization, have shifted a little bit as well. So our current focus is dedicated to ensuring that when psychedelics become registered medicines, that they can be embedded in the mental health infrastructure, which I think is the most pivotal challenge that we have here today, in a way that is safe and ethical and equitable and sustainable.
What's your vision about the future of psychedelics? Can they find their way into mainstream mental health care?
Yes, I mean, my hope is that they will be available to everyone, that they'll be available at all mental health centers, that all therapists will have good training in how to use them, that anybody who needs them will be able to get them, and that there'll be different modalities. There will be options in traditional medical centers, there'll be options in spiritual centers, in indigenous healing circles.
My overall prognosis about the future is that MDMA will be a prescribable medicine in 2 years. For psilocybin, I think 4 to 5 years, and for LSD 8 to 10 years, when there is not a major backlash. Major backlash is possible always when bad things happen, when people committing suicide during a session, then that will be very difficult then to go on with the treatment where people are dying. And so we are not on a solid ground. And the actual hype about this substance is majorly an economic hype, I hope, and I think this will collapse in the next 2 years in favor of a normal development that is not so quick and not so easy and not so booming as it seems now, but a more consolidated kind of growth that will lead us to the goal that these substances are available again.
We're trying to really shape how they will eventually land in the mental health care infrastructure, and that's I think our main challenge. And if we accomplish that, if we find a model to do that, that is reimbursed by healthcare insurers, that will lead to safe and effective and ethical treatments, and we keep following patients over a long period of time, so we really understand how they're doing also 2, 3, 5 years from now, I think then we've set an example for the rest of the world. And that is our current ambition.